Welcome back to the latest episode of TT Plays. My name's Sung Soo, and joining me now for like Water Merlin 101 is the one and only Killydis from Luxera's map and online Grand Archive fame. So, Killy, how you doing?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here today. I really appreciate it.
No, I'm thrilled to have you on. I have copied your deck lists many a times with mixed results, and I'm excited to talk about kind of Merlin 3 and then really focus on Water Merlin 3, which I do think is definitely a speciality within the game.
Yeah, watermelon is very different compared to other melons in terms of playstyle and in terms of options and choices, which is a little harder for. I don't want to say it's harder, but it's a little more nuanced than a lot of other elements. So
Yeah, I don't think it's as intuitive as like taking the deck list and going, right? I think you kind of need to understand what the deck was doing with all the individual parts. And that's kind of why I love Water Merlin. But first, let's talk about Merlin 3. So, in your opinion, what makes Merlin 3 such an incredible and appealing hero champion?
so I think it's one of the first champions in the game where it has kind of like three mechanics to its kit. And so, you talk about it has like level growth, card draw, and attack power. And if you compare that to all the other champions, no other champions kit really compare, right? Usually they'll have one type of static mechanic, like either plus power for Lorraine or like getting back a sword, or maybe even Rai comes closest with his level 2 inheritable and then level 3 for getting levels. But Merlin is just at a different level just because it does three things at once, which is why it's an SR. But um, I imagine other champions in the future, you know, this is probably like the bar, right? Three mechanics, maybe it's an SR champ. So
Yeah,
uh,
no, I definitely think she's raised the bar for future champions as to kind of what we expect from a power level. And because of this, really, she's become kind of a meta staple. Like, I think if you're going to show up to an event, you need to factor on playing Merlin 3. So, does Merlin 3 have any generic weak points, do you think? Like any kind of, uh, uniform things across all the elements you can kind of take advantage of?
yeah, so Merlin is a champion. Obviously, you want to get there as soon as possible because its ability is starts accruing at that point once you get to level 3, and so it kind of suffers in the early game. But each element has a way of dealing with the early game, um, or turboing into that level 3 as soon as possible. And so, really, Merlin is a deck that focuses on like turns 5 plus, maybe 4 plus. You can get there sooner. Where if you can get under Merlin, then they'll be in trouble, even with the levels of protection through like resolute stand and whatnot. So
All right, so you kind of said it right. She's almost mirroring the early Rye archetype, where I'm going to get to level 3 and I'm going to win the game. Where Rye is going to go in for that big explosive turn, right? Merlin is can be explosive, but really we're just talking about like incremental value and kind of grinding you down once she kind of gets up there. Would you agree with that?
exactly, she provides kind of like inevitability with
That's a
her
great way
with
to
her
put it.
draw
Yeah.
card, right, and then her increased power, her levels, right. Eventually, she'll start casting high power spells for very high levels, with either Fireball or Incarnate Majesty. And so, yeah, it has inevitability. And if you let the game drag on long, Merlin will probably like take it out underneath. So
Now, one of the things we kind of blipped over here, Merlin 3, obviously, we talked about all the benefits she has, but Crux itself feels like a really powerful advanced element. So, what do you think of Crux?
I think Crux is more fair recently after the bannings, and so I think Crux has different identities now. You can kind of consider prismatic edge looping, or you can kind of go down an soul route with Majestic Spirit, or just playing Majestic Spirit package. There are some staples now. Like I used to think Ghost Pendragon was not a staple before because it was you're heavily reliant on Ascension and Crux Sight. But now Pendragon is starting to become a staple in the Crux package, either at 3 or 4 of. And so I think it's healthy right now. I think some of the Crux packages are a little bit weaker than others. You don't see a whole lot of Infusion package running around, even though it was good during DOA era. And you don't also see in Soa as well because it kind of gets bodied by Resolute Stand as well. So
Yeah, but I do think the fact that there are so many different packages you can build in Crux makes it a like I said, compelling element, and it's got a bunch of different ways there, and you have a bunch of different decisions in the deck building about like you said, what Crux package am I going to bring? Even the numbers, right? I see some people running four Majesty, four Ghost, four Ascension. I still see some people running four Crux sites. I feel like there's just so many options in what you can slap in there that Crux is a phenomenal element in my opinion.
It's very strong. It's one of the advanced elements that has natural card advantage built into the Crux element. You know, you have like recursion with Crux Sight. You just have natural draw two from Ghost Pendragon. Um, and so even like on Soul, just being able to like get back a drawn blade to draw one is still advantage or at least plus zeroing. And so it's yeah, it's a very powerful element comparatively to the others.
All right, so we've kind of gone over at a high level Merlin 3. We've talked about Crux a little bit, so let's get to the meat and potatoes of the episode. Like, why water? When she came out, did you immediately go water? Have you always just been a blue mage, or what is the
I
appeal of water?
I always played water. In Dawn of Ashes, I played Water the Rain to some great success. Um, and then I kind of just stuck to it because I felt like water was underrepresented, and I wanted to kind of innovate in the water space and try to make it viable. But you know, even with some of my results on the online tournaments, and you know, doing well at regionals and whatnot, but I don't know. People just don't pick up on it, and it's interesting. And so I think water is too reactive, maybe for some players. It's its answers are not universal. They're very narrow sometimes. Like you have Song of Frost, Water Barrier. They're all very narrow solutions to a certain situation, and so you kind of have to prepare going into a tournament, thinking of like what's the meta, what should I put into my deck? Should I bring in water barriers? Should I not? Should I bring in revitalize and cleanse? Should I bring in title sweeps for some people who really hate title sweep? Which title sweep is a very cool card to punish opponents flooding out on turn two with Lorraine with Sword of Adversity as well. And so it's a lot of decisions before you even get to the event that I think is interesting about playing water.
Would you agree then that water again, the meta has to kind of be settled, right? And then water has the ability to be reactive to what you would expect to run into? Or do you think water can be like a tempo setting deck? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think there is a world where water can be a tempo oriented deck, but I don't think someone has discovered it. You know, there are Chilling Touch, there's Mind Freezes, there's Nias, which can really halt your opponent's leveling plan or just kind of strip them of their resources. And I don't know if that deck has been explored to its full extent. Um, Recently, with Scepter Lumina, there is a new archetype with water, right? Water allies has merged from that review reveal, and so now you have aggressive water ally decks where they used to not have that reach before, and so I think water is starting to become more interesting. People might see it as an option now, but I think before, like when it came to like Houston before Houston, um, or I mean Houston before it was not as popular, and so the proxy cards help a lot too. I think.
Yeah, Scepter of Lumina is just game changing, right? Like the amount of power they printed in one card is just insane. So I do have to ask the one question that everyone brings up when I talk to them about playing water is, are you concerned with going to time?
I I personally am sometimes. I play fast, and I try to encourage my opponents to play a little faster. So that is a problem. I think because people are not familiar playing with water, it adds a lot of extra time to their thinking and to what they want to play first. And so as a water player, I'm pretty practiced. You know, I know my lines. I know what a frostbite will counter. I know when to factorize and whatnot. And so people haven't had those situations, and so it's just for them they haven't adapted to it yet. But I think if people play more water, then they'll start seeing the patterns, right? They'll know like, oh, okay, I can cast this ally and still have two open, right?
Yeah, they don't always have to be afraid of the frostbind. So
They don't always have to be afraid of it.
Right. So you went over a bunch of different water cards. Could we take a few minutes? Like, are there some water MVPs for you, or like defining cards within the water element?
Yeah, I think Fractalize is very powerful. It's one of the first. It permanently gets rid of Regalia in a way, not like Zephyr, right? Zephyr's temporary, but Fractalize is a very strong answer to a problem like Regalia. Um, and to me, Tide Diviner is probably one of the reasons I play Water. I like Tide Diviner a lot. I think it's one of the only cards in the game in its base element form can can go either like +0 and or +2 or 3. Like the ceiling is so high, right? Especially when you play it in Merlin, and it sets up a lot of different plays for you. So I think Tide Diviner is a very high ceiling water card, and it's probably one of the reasons I like playing water.
So I was surprised you didn't mention Paladin. How do you feel about the Paladin?
Um, at the end of the day, Paladin is a -1, right? Even if you use the floating to draw one.
Mhm.
There's a lot of good answers to Paladin right now. You know, people are playing Focus Flame, right? Just swinging dudes into it. And Paladin is very strong. Don't get me wrong; it's very strong. But sometimes I don't run Paladin or shave Paladins, just because I'm more focused on a certain game plan when I play my deck. When I play Watermelon, so like for me, it's like getting to level 3 as fast as possible. If you kind of play into your opponent's game plan by playing Paladin to think that it will slow them down, it might actually inversely hurt you because you're not leveling as fast potentially. And when you get to the level, you won't have the cards in hand to do what you need to do as well.
Yeah. So when you say it's a -1, you're factoring in the cost of it, right? The fact that it itself is a card, the one floating memory you're eating, and then you're only drawing one card on top of it. Correct?
Right, correct. That's what I mean by a -1. It's still it's like playing an ally, right? It's just a body. It's a big body for cheap, but it's something that people are kind of people know how to play into it a lot of times.
All right. And the last card that we've kind of mentioned, kind of talked on, is of course Frostbind that I want to hit on here. So, how I rated Frostbind as one of the most influential cards of Fractured Crown when Fractured Crown came out. Do you think that was accurate? Do you think I overrated Frostbind, or where do you land on this card?
It would be more influential if Waters played more. Um,
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but I think when an opponent goes against a water player, it is very influential in that matchup, right? Sometimes people will play around it and the person won't even have it in their deck, right? I've heard people say that in their list, or they'll shave a frostbite or two and say, they have to still respect it eventually. And so I think it's very influential in the matchup. I don't know if it's influential in the meta.
I think that's a great way to put that. So, is there anything else you want to talk about water? Otherwise, I want to kind of get into like water Merlin archetypes because I think there's a lot of different win cons, and because of that, there's a lot of kind of subtle different ways Merlin water can be built.
I think we talked about the water cards that stand out the most: Factorize, Frostbind, Tide Diviner. We kind of hint on Frostborn Paladin. Um, I think maybe one card I like a lot is Mind Freeze, but that's within the Merlin archetype. Just being able to time walk your opponent sometimes is really powerful. When you get to that opportunity. But it's only relevant against certain matchups, probably against other Merlin opponents or against maybe even it's okay against Rye, but you do kind of potentially give them a lot of levels because you might banish arcane cards in their memory. So I think Mind Free is very powerful. I don't think it's a very explored card. So
Yeah, so for those of you who don't know, Mind Freeze is a 5 cost slow mage card where banish level cards at random from target opponent's memory and return those at the beginning of their next end phase. And of course, it is floating memory on it. So when you talk about a time walk, you can take their entire memory because Merlin's level gets so ridiculous and just banish it, right? And then
exactly.
due to the way the banishing works, since it doesn't, you get to see those cards as well because they're banished and then turned face up, so you gain a lot of information.
Correct. Yeah, it's banished to a public zone,
Right.
which a lot of
So
people asked about sometimes with Chilling Touch and Mind Freeze. They didn't realize like is it revealed? But yeah, in technicality, it is revealed because it
yeah,
transfers to a public zone.
And Chilling Touch is Baby Mind Freeze, right? Which is a slow
Yes.
one mage spell. Banish one card at random, floating memory. Again, kind of a controversial card, I feel. People either love or hate Chilling Touch. But again, the information you can get from it, you can really mess up leveling sometimes. I think it can be really powerful in the right situations.
Yes.
All right, so let's get into the win con. So I'm going to outline what I think are a couple Merlin win cons and decks, and please tell me if you think I'm wrong anywhere. We have the Crux Heavy decks, and there's a couple different ways to build Crux Heavy. We can loop Prismatic Edge, right, where we're maybe even bringing our own fire cards for a reveal. We can go something where we're Ghost Geist Heavy, just playing kind of Crux beaters, maybe quote unquote card advantage or card neutrality, swinging through there. Or we could like really kind of rush Tide Diviner and Majesty with Crux Sight. We
Yeah, I think those are the three general win cons for Water Merlin. Is there any one that you want to talk a little bit more about?
I would love to start with the sword decks first because I do think it's really interesting that you can go Prismatic Edge or Erendite and end up with like two really different ways that you can play off of the Ascension, which is obviously a really powerful card. I think that's really cool personally.
Sometimes you can play both in the deck.
No, and it's like, what are you doing?
There was a version of Watermelon where I tried a Prismatic Edge variant where I had wind cards and fire cards. It was cute. It's maybe a little too greedy, but yeah. So the sword decks are pretty interesting. Especially because there is like a variant of Fire Merlin that is running around that's Prismatic Merlin. Um, and so you can kind of capitalize on that as well as Watermelon. What's the main benefit of playing a prismatic edge loop in Watermelon is that you have to draw naturally built into your color. So everything you do with prismatic edge looping is a +0, and then you get the +1 from the opposite element, either from your opponent or from the cards you put into your own memory. Sometimes you get +2, which is the crazy part with prismatic edge, but you have it's a lot of setup to get that, and so I think Prismatic Edge is more of a lock. It kind of shuts your opponent down, either stripping their resources, getting you resources, or impacting the board by removing allies with 3 damage. Um, and so I think that's like it weakens your opponent to get you to the point where you can completely take over the game. Right? You just accrue so much card advantage, and then like in fire, you just go with the fireball plan. Um, in Watermelon, it enables you to play a turn where you just tie diviner, and then the following turn you can get your Erendite and win from there. So
Yeah, so Erendite's the other one. You kind of touched on it there, right? Erendite's the one where it ETBs and you can basically banish floating memory to get additional damage onto your sword at like a 2-to-1 rate, right? So every one card we banish, we're essentially getting 2 power onto that weapon in the form of counters. What do you think of Erendite? Is there like a magic floating memory number for you? I've seen some crazy floating memory decks. I've seen some really lean ones. Where do you end up falling in that spectrum?
I usually fall around 20 to 24 floating memory.
Okay.
It is when you play Erendite, you really have to consider deck construction a lot, especially with the number of floating cards you play. Um, and then when I play a Tide Diviner, usually for 7 or 8 or 9, right? You kind of want to hit at least 2 or 3 floating memories. So even with that ratio, you kind of want to think about like, okay, maybe a third of my deck needs to be at least over a third needs to be floating memory because you have to account for while you're leveling as well. So
Yeah, so the Tide Diviner decision trees I've seen a lot of people stumble on. Do you have any tips there about like how to determine what needs to come into your hand? Do you value Crux Sight? Because I've seen a lot of people really say, I want Crux Sight because if I Tide Diviner for 12, I want to get back the second most important card or something like that.
I oh, so Tide Diviner is pretty flexible as a card in general, right? Even if you play it on turn 1, it's still +0, right? It can help you level up efficiently at level 1, it can be a +1. But yeah, when you get to that stage of the game, when you're like Merlin 7, Merlin 8, and you pitch a bunch of cards, you're looking. So maybe it's the way I play Tide Diviner. When I play Tide Diviner, I'm going to set up for the kill. I'm not digging for answers. If I have to Tide Diviner to find answers, that means I'm really in trouble. And so if you have to dig for answers, maybe you're digging for a residue stand or something. That's understandable. But I think it's okay to mill your crux cards. If that's the concern, or just pick the crux card, right? Just pick the one crux card you need, right? They're all good, like if it's a majestic spirit or if it's an ascension, um, or a pendragon, they're all good cards to pick regardless, right? So I think it's okay to put them into your graveyard if you have to.
Yeah, and again, just talk about what Killy was talking about, right? If you play Tide Diviner, when he says it's a +0, it's a neutral card. It replaces itself. When we talk about it getting advantage, right, that's really how much float is it putting into the graveyard, and we're counting that as kind of the advantage of the card there, right?
Yes, exactly. Sorry, I didn't clarify that.
It's okay. It's okay. Just for the 101 people, they're brand new. They want to be like you when they grow up. We just want to make sure that they're kind of following along there. So, is Scepter like a focal point of your building ever, or is Scepter just something that ends up in decks?
I think Scepter should be somewhere in your deck period, even if it's sideboard. I think it's very powerful. Even if you're playing in Watermelon, maybe it's probably most prominent. You'll bring it out in the mirrors or in the Merlin matchups. Against aggro decks, you probably won't bring it out at all, right? So, um, but somewhere you kind of have to think of Scepter Lumina is that it's also like a grand. It's also a GCR. It plus ones, even though you lose one from memory or floating. It draws +2, right? So it's still a GCR in some way. And what's really interesting about it is you can kind of use it to your advantage to help you level up as well. It puts you put down 5 to draw 2, right? So you can kind of use that as a leveling as a way to get to level 3, because a lot of cards in water are 2 cost. Um, so I think Scepter is very strong. I did try to make Scepter a focal point of the deck earlier, with sudden steals and scepters,
Mhm.
and it kind of enables an alternative game plan with Watermelon. If you had a paladin, and if you're going the scepter route and you have sudden steal, you can dish out some major damage in the first 3 turns, which might catch your opponent off guard, especially in a slower matchup. So it can kind of become a pseudo aggro deck.
Awesome. Yeah, Scepter has been, like you said, just incredible. And I do think people really sleep on the 5 Banish Scepter, draw 2 cards, like you said. Like, if you materialize this, get 1 level up for 4 damage, and then later on you choose to banish it to draw 2 cards, you've gotten so much value out of 1 materialization. It really doesn't compare to anything else.
Yes, it's very powerful. I'm surprised it was kind of printed. Actually, it's a little too powerful. I think.
Uh, yeah, I don't want it taken away. But it has a I think it literally could have one of the 2 abilities and it would still be a fine card. But yeah, it's got just got so much text on it. Um, all right, so we talked about the end of the Crux package. We talked about Erendite there and the Ascensions. We talked a little bit about Scepter. So where are you currently leaning in the current meta for someone who just wants to jump into Merlin 3 Water, get started? Like, which route would you point your young Padawan in? Like, is there a package you think they should explore first?
I think the most intuitive package is just playing Ghost Pendragons and Majestic Spirits
Mhm.
and Ascension. I think Watermelon should probably run Erendite. So you'll probably have to play the Tide Diviner into Ascension to Erendite or something. Um, but yeah, I would say that's the core package. That's the package I'm on right now. It's just Majestic Spirits, 4 Majestic Spirits, 3 Ghost Pendragons, and 3 Ascensions. And then I like to play 2 Spirits Blessing. In a lot of my lists, I run 2 Spirits Blessing, just because. And I explained to a lot of people who ask me that question is it's one of your ways to deal with opposing Majestic Spirits. And so what I mean by that is you get Erendite out, and then you probably do it at a point where you're even level, and so you get your +2 attack bonus from Merlin. And so you can get your Erendite to do like 11 damage or 13 damage, and then you clear the Majestic Spirit, and then it's kind of a waste if you don't get to get damage through, right? So you Spirit's Blessing, and then you swing for another 11. Or in another case, if they don't have the Majestic Spirit, then it's like you're looking at 22 points of damage out of nowhere, which is super surprising, right? You chip them with a Ghost Pendragon and a Majestic Spirit, and then they're just dead, right? So it won me several games, particularly into win Merlin the most, actually.
Okay, so then your crux package again was four majesties, three pendragons, three ghosts, two spirit blessings right now. I kind of
Yes.
like the home run potential at spirit blessing. You said you want to run about 20 to 24 floating memory on normal, just a little bit over a third of your deck, especially when you're factoring leveling up. And those are kind of the guardrails for Water Merlin, you'd say.
Yeah, I would say so. And then protection spells, anything to protect yourself to get to level 3.
Yeah, you mentioned Resolute Stand. Is there anything else that jumps out to you?
Um, I guess this week I'm testing out Water Barrier.
Oh, okay.
Because I think right now in the meta, there's a lot of Fire Lorraine or Erupting Rhapsody decks coming up, and so um, I'm testing out Water Barrier. I did try out sometimes Guarded Dissipation, which is pretty interesting. If you get your Erendite out and you can out of nowhere prevent 10 or 11 damage, untyped damage with Guarded Dissipation is really crazy.
So when
Um,
Dissipation works, it's felt amazing.
oh
And when it doesn't work, I'm like, why is this card in my deck? I
yeah.
take anything else.
No, but just a good mix of protection and removal, so that you can deal with allies or you can deal with damage to the dome. So
Yeah, Song of Frost for me has been a personal MVP. I've really loved a couple of those. We have a lot of aggro Lorraine decks there. Nothing makes me happier telling her to just hang out over there till the end of the turn. All right. So, do you have anything in closing you'd like to mention about Water Merlin? I think this was a great run through. I think it gives people a lot of great places to start. Hopefully, it explains a little bit more about how the deck should be piloted. But any closing thoughts there?
I think Watermelon is underrepresented. I think it's a very good deck right now, just because it can handle those situations with the fire graveyard based strategies. You have your Lantern Factorize combo, right? Kind of considered a hard lock in that matchup. Um, and yeah, don't be afraid. I think it would be pretty boring if there's only two elements in the game, right? Wind and fire. So definitely try out water, and yeah, that's it. Just try it out.
All right, Kelly. Well, I do want to thank you so much for coming on. Please, everyone, give us a like, give us a subscribe. If you like this, maybe we can have Kelly back on for a level 200 class. We'll dive a little bit deeper into everything. Thank you so much. I wish you good luck. Are you heading out to Ascent, Ontario? Are you going to any big events for Grand Archive?
Oh, that's kind of like my dilemma right now. Actually, I'm having discussions with the waifu, what events I can attend, because I wanted to attend all three Ontario, Nats, and Worlds, but I'm gonna have to choose probably two of the three, and so I have to have some discussion.
I'm in the same boat. I'm asking for a budget. I'm gonna submit my proposals to the wife. Like, this is what I'd like to do. This is what I think it'll cost. May I please go outside and play with my friends? And we'll see where it lies. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you everyone for watching. Until next time, everyone, cheers and happy gaming. Awesome. I think that went great. And I got one bonus question for you.
Okay,
On a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you hate Scavenging Raccoon?
not really. You play around
Okay.
it.
Yeah, you like the raccoon?
I think Raccoon's fine. Are you talking about playing it in your deck or playing against it?
Playing against it.
Okay, I think I think people have to be careful with raccoons. It's something that is in the meta and it crops up once in a while. But I guess this is also part of deck design and building as well. Is that you play around it. You play cards that are neutral cards like Fractal of Insight. It's a +0, right? But it helps you get to level 2, and it doesn't expose you into opposing raccoons. And then
Yeah, I think
also
it's
just playing a bunch of fast floating memory too to help counter that.
yeah, you'll always see someone that like their turn. I don't know. They cast idle thoughts and memory on their turn. The chilling touch, excuse me, right? And then
Yes.
they just got like blown out by the raccoon. And I'm like, you didn't have to do that. You could have done a little better there. But
Yeah. It's tough because I think idle thoughts is a fine turn one play. But yeah, you can just get kind of blown out on the following turn.
yeah, and then the wind raccoon gives me nightmares. The bouncing, displacing wind raccoon. Just
I haven't faced that yet. Is it bad?
it's not my favorite because again they can do the stuff at instant speed, right? They'll flicker their thing,
Exactly.
suppress it. It's just yeah.
I'm surprised that's not very good right now into all these fire graveyard strategy decks. I'm
I
kind of
think it's a little
surprised.
too cute, too slow.
Okay,
Right, because if you end up with a whole bunch of flicker and you don't have the raccoon, you're just getting run over by Lorraine, right?
that's fair. Maybe that's where Sylvie shines, right? You can blissful calling for your raccoon. And
Uh, I can only dream. I don't know. Trent and I talked about Sylvie. We're still working on it, but
oh man, I've been working on Sylvie on the side as well, and it's a hard one to crack. So
yeah, I feel like it's so close in so many different ways, and then so far away in other ways. It's I don't know. It's a frustrating deck to work on.
maybe it is frustrating. Maybe it's because our the way we think about deck building with Sylvie, or the plan, right? Maybe the plan is counterintuitive to how we like to play. Like we like to think of card advantage in terms of pure cards like card draw and whatnot. But I don't think I've seen a lot of people talk about like board presence, like how much does board presence matter in terms of advantage versus whatnot. So
Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting conversation to have. I like your mindset there. I like, when I'm not saying whether avarice should have been banned or not. I don't have a whatever. But all I was saying, and all I've said this whole time, is the game hasn't been out that long. We
right,
haven't had this set of cards. We haven't had this meta. It was 35 days or something when they. And I'm not saying it was wrong. All I'm saying is it was really early. And all these people are like, "This is the most broken thing ever. We'll never find a solution." I'm like, "Yeah, we might.
no,
We just
there
gotta,
are solutions. Yeah,
yeah,
people
just
are
gotta
just
give it a chance."
yeah, and I'm kind of curious of like how does innovation happen, right? Like how do we get people to become more creative in problem solving instead of asking for bans? I think Rise is a perfectly fine solution going to extend to Houston. I think if you blow up your opponent by turn 4 or 5, Merlin decks can't really do a whole lot after that. But then I think it's well balanced. I think just people don't want to play those decks, and so yeah.
Yeah, I also think personally that in the age of the internet, people just like to complain.
Okay.
And sometimes people like to complain really loudly, and that's okay. Everyone's entitled to do what they want. But yeah, I think there is a ton of room for innovation. I think one of the most appealing things about Grand Archive to me is how deep the deck building is. Like, if you really like deck building, there are tons of things you can do in this game, and it's only going to get crazier as the card pool. Right, the card pool is going to triple in a year.
Yes.
That's
It,
insane to think about, right? The amount of, I mean, theoretically, right? We don't know how large the other sets are, but like if the major sets are roughly the size of Ashes, which is kind of what we're seeing with Alchemical, and the minor sets are about the size of Fractal, right? We're tripling our card pool in a year. The things you'll have access to, the tools you'll have will be crazy, I think.
yeah, I'm a huge deck builder too, and so it's one of the appeal of the game to me.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining me. Yeah, I think the call went great. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for having me. I'm kind of surprised you reached out to me. I don't think I like to kind of hang back and like be in the shadows. I don't I don't normally get out, so um, but thank you for helping me, I guess, in a way to talk about Grand Archive.
Of course, yeah. I mean, your results kind of speak for themselves. I think you are the resident expert in it, even if you like to hang out behind the curtain. I mean, your name's on Luxera's map every week. I mean, you're doing good jobs. And one of the things I always appreciated from afar, because we just met recently, was like your lists were never the same every week. Like I'd see you top, and then the next week you're doing something different. And to me, that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and I'm just adjusting to the meta, right? It's just you have to keep up with it in Watermelon, or I guess playing Water in general. You have to kind of know how the meta is going to shape out to bring the right counters and the right answers.
Yeah, and again, I think that's really cool. I think it's one of the best things Grand Archive has going for it. That, and again, the depth of decision. So yeah, I mean, happy to have you on, and again, would love to have you on in the future if you feel like there's another level you wanna take the lessons to.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a lot actually, especially on the turns you get to level 3 and why Dungeon Guide is so important and yeah, there's a lot of things you can talk about advanced plays.
Yeah, I can't wait.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. So yeah, thank you so much. Have a good night.